players gather to cast powerful spells. Some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering. Lotus Petal, Force of Negation, Wasteland, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, ThrabenU University, and TheEpicStorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Eminence Gaming.
Hello, and welcome to episode 100 of the Eternal Glory podcast, The Importance of the Gathering, and Orcish Bowmasters. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU, joined by
Brian Coval, aka BoshNRoll,
and Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm.
All right, we've already recorded 30 minutes of introductions and banter for the week available in our supporter-exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead, and you can find out why Bryant Cook over there sounds a little bit funny tonight.
Yep, great mysteries will be revealed. Shout out to our new paid subscribers, Potato David 1987. Shout out to Potato David. Yef D Tudge, Tudge. I don't know if this word is meant to be said out loud, but that's their username. And Thalia Grixis Woman. Shout out to those new people. And while we're shouting people out, I would like to do a call to the rest of you who enjoy the show. Our Patreon is there. That's how we support the show. YouTube membership's there. That's how we support the show. We used to ask for donations and make a call every episode and operate on a donation basis. And now it's a little more formal than that, but we do still need support, because if this doesn't make sense, we just won't do it anymore. We're all busy people. So please, please, please check out patreon.com/eternalglory or go to our YouTube and join as a member to keep us doing our thing here. We appreciate all of you.
And we have to pay our editor. Thanks, Phil. You do great work. Speaking of paying our editor, if you're interested in running an event or want your local game store to do so, but are worried about the logistics of it, check out Eminence Gaming's Command Tower software. You can create and manage 4-player or 1v1 tournaments easily, and its unique pairing system ensures you don't get paired against the same players multiple times. Visit eminence.events for details. So we're gonna start episode 100 here, which is kind of a big marker for a podcast, by talking about the impact of Magic and legacy on our lives. For all of us, content creation is at least a part-time job at this point, and it's consumed 10, 15, 20 years or more of our lives. And we want to get a little bit of personal, dig into some feelings, some wonderful anecdotes, and what Magic means to us.
Yeah, I'm in the 27-year club out of Magic's 30 years of existing. So been here a very long time, impacting my life. I have told this anecdote on the pod before, but just talking to some friends, we were trying to figure out like who the most influential people in our lives were. And outside of our parents, most of us came up with Richard Garfield and Mark Rosewater in our top 5. I got to meet Mark Rosewater finally after all these years at MagicCon Philly earlier this year, and I told him that story, and he appeared very happy to hear it, like ponderously happy, like no one had phrased it quite like that before. And then he insisted we get a selfie together, even though I didn't ask. So I think he liked hearing that, and I do genuinely believe it. And being that the three of us, like you said, Phil, now make part or all of our living talking about Magic the Gathering, obviously it's been an impact on all of us.
So I think I'll start off here. I don't know how many times I've just kind of like publicly stated this, but I've moved a lot. I haven't stayed in the same place for very long. I've done my journey from Illinois to Iowa, back to Illinois, to Maryland, to Virginia. I moved around 3 or 4 times within the same city while living in Virginia, and now I'm in North Carolina. So I haven't stayed in the same place for very long, and like I think I'm settled for a good number of years now. When you move across the country like that and you keep constantly relocating, like you don't know people. You don't have friends. And when you're in college, like, it's real easy to just find people to hang out with. But, as an adult, as a 30-something-year-old, like, how do you go and meet friends? Well, the answer for me was, I'm going to go to whatever weekly Magic event they have. And that's how I made friends in all of these new places. And I don't want to say, like, if it weren't for Magic, I never would have made any friends. But one of the things that I think about the most that had just a profound impact on my life is I played a Thursday night Legacy Weekly. I met a guy, his name's Kerry, one of my best friends in the world. And I mentioned, like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about going to Richmond this weekend to play in a Magic event. And he's like, hey, do you want to carpool and get a hotel and just, like, do it? And I had known this guy for 2 hours. Like, we had played one game of Magic together and we had chatted between rounds. And it was like, fuck yeah, I do. And now this guy is someone who has helped me build Thraben University, the website side of things. And, like, he visited my home and stayed overnight last week. And, like, that's the sort of thing that happened because I knew how to play this card game.
Yeah, I'm going to co-sign everything you said. I haven't moved quite as many times as you, but I had some moves during extremely formative years. I moved in the summer between 10th and 11th grade. Like, high school is a time where you want stability. Like, you're about to figure out, like, what your steps into adulthood are going to be. All your friends from school, people are going through all their awkward phases and whatever it is. And being 15 going on 16 and just like, guess what? You live in a new state now because dad got a new job, can be quite the shakeup. Magic the Gathering, and shout out my other hobby, punk rock. I immediately found my people very quickly just because I dressed a certain way. The punks and metalheads were like, hey, I think we might get along. And then showing up at game stores and just seeing people playing Magic in the library or whatever, walking up to them, just immediate friend groups, or at least acquaintance groups, from which I could sniff out the actual friends from in a new space at a very important time to not be alone in the world. So shout out to Magic the Gathering for that. And then stepping into adulthood right out of college, I moved to Pittsburgh, where I've been for a decade now. It seems crazy to say that. Actually longer, I think 12, 13 years. I've been here a long time now, and moved to a city where I didn't know anybody. And I just posted on Facebook, where do people play Magic? I was told Tuesday nights at Carnegie Mellon University. And I showed up, and sitting around the table were Richard Shea, Dr. Rich Shea, who I knew from Magic articles and stuff. It's like, oh my God, Rich Shea's here. And Chris Stagno, a person who I knew peripherally from judging Magic tournaments. He was also a level 2 judge. I'd seen him around. Steve Rubin was there, who was just a 17-year-old child at the time, not the Pro Tour champion and lead designer of Runeterra, who he is now. And just Andrew Cuneo was in the room. Like, I know you from Pro Tour coverage. And all these people, several of which I had heard of in like kind of pseudo-celebrity status. And they were just like, oh, great, we need a 6 for draft, sit down. And immediately in with all of them. You hear about, making friends as an adult is hard. I have seen some of my partners and some of my non-magical friends go through that, where like they just want to do something but don't really know who to call or where to go. And it's tough. Like, there's like 2 people that they could call and they're both busy. Now, what do I do? I don't even try that hard, and I probably have 30, 40 people I could send a Facebook message to and see if they want to hang out right now. And some of them would say yes. That's as an adult, and it's really nice. And I'll cede the mic to Bryant in a second here, but when you said you met this guy and then hours later you had planned a trip together, it reminded me of one of my first trips. After I moved to Pittsburgh, I met Bill Senaway, who is probably not a name a lot of people heard, but he had some Pro Tour appearances in the early 2010s. And we met at CMU draft, and he was like, oh yeah, Star City Columbus is coming up. I have a car going. I'm splitting a hotel room with some people, and if you want to get in. So Bill and I, we did a road trip, like Phil just said. And then when we got to the hotel room, there was another guy there named Ron Rogers, who I still know to this day, who I had never met before. And Bill was basically like, there's 3 of us and there's 2 beds. Let's flip a coin. And I lost the coin flip. And I was like, it's nice to meet you, Ron. And then we shared a bed. And that's just like a perfectly normal and thing that happens in this community. And I love it.
Unlike the 2 of you, I didn't move a whole lot. I moved to Syracuse when I was in like 3rd grade, and I've been in the area pretty much ever since. But when I was 10, my parents were like, you like this card game, maybe you should go to this game store. And they just literally dropped me off. I had no one there. They're like, here's $10. You can like buy drinks or whatever. And I ended up signing up for a Legacy event. It's weird, but I didn't know this going in. Legacy was just like, Syracuse, New York was one of the few hotbeds in the entire country for Legacy, because MTG The Source was partially founded here. It was founded by a guy in Albany, a guy in Syracuse, and somebody in Portland. When I walked in, they're just like, yeah, we have this tournament, you should play. And I got absolutely demolished, but I loved it. And as a 10-year-old, I was one of the youngest people there, but I quickly became very good friends with a lot of the older guys there. These guys were 16, 18, and they just looked at me like a little brother for the next few years while I figured out how to play Magic. And they taught me a lot of like my values, I should say. Like, as an impressionable kid, I think they got the idea that maybe my parents weren't the best influence on me as a young person. Like, they were... I'm not going to bash my parents here, but we don't have a great working relationship. And they sort of were like, hey, you shouldn't say that sort of thing, or this is how you should do things. And they really just like guided me through life. And I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for them. So thank you to a bunch of those people. I'm not going to name all of you, but you know who you are. So it did a lot to shape who I am today. And a lot of people ask me like, hey, Bryant, why do you use Japanese foils? Out of the three of us, I think it's safe to say that Phil is the weeb of the group. I'm not really into like Japanese culture or anything, but I love Japanese foils. And most of it is to pay respects to the people before me. A lot of the people that taught me, those better values and all that stuff, like they were really into it. And I sort of just decided at some point to carry on to the tradition after they had quit Magic. Not necessarily the best like financial choice, but it makes me happy and it makes me think of them. So I just wanted to share that.
That's great. And since you said like not the best financial choice, that made me think of one of the things that I wanted to talk about here, which is financial stability that Magic has provided to me in my life. It's kind of weirdly backwards, because on the one hand, Magic's an expensive hobby. It's a luxury hobby. It's not for everyone. Even today, like reserve lists versus proxy discourse is a big part of the culture. At the same time, like an 11-year-old kid opening a Mindslaver in a pack of Mirrodin or whatever, which was a $10 card at the time, like that's a $10 bill in your pocket in a lot of ways. At least like a $5 bill if you flip into the store. So having decks of Magic cards, if it didn't provide liquid cash, which it has here and there in my life, it at least provided knowing that you have some sort of nest egg. When I was in college, I judged all over the place. I was a very active level 2 judge in the country and out of the country on some occasions. I used my judge comp to build a vintage deck. I assembled all my power. I foiled out the perfect storm for vintage, and I just had this foiled out vintage deck. I had started to build out my legacy collection, had duels and all that stuff. And then I got shot out of the college canon into the post-2008 housing market collapse economy of the United States. And with my college degree and my tens of thousands of dollars in debt, I got a job making $21,000 a year. And you're both nodding. We are of the same age, and the people older than us were like, yeah, just why didn't you buy a house by the time you were 23? It's like, because those are very expensive and I have no money. And that was just the state of the world at the time. And there were times where I was like eating ramen noodles or saltine crackers with peanut butter on them for 3 of my meals a day. I had a job working at a school where staff could eat in the school cafeteria for free on the clock. So I did a lot of that, just sort of like making it work hand to mouth, day by day, trying to figure out how to make more money and be a stable human being in the world. Through all of that, I owned a foiled out vintage deck and dual lands. And I just knew like if I need to hit the eject button, I have like 5 or 10 grand and could survive, which created this bubble where I did not have the existential dread that I would have had if I was in the same position without owning my Magic collection. And it just provided this level of comfort where I don't need to freak out. I got this. I'm going to try to make it work without selling off my possessions, but I do actually have quite a lot here ready to go if I need it.
I think it's easy to like look at our success now and be like, man, it's always been like this for you all. And the answer is just like, no, it hasn't. I was scraping by on a teacher's salary while trying to like live alone by myself, and that didn't work out super well. And at one point, I actually offloaded most of my legacy collection. I don't really talk about this publicly a lot, but I was close to having 4X legacy minus some of the crazy stuff like tabernacles and some of the old black enchantments and stuff. And then my car literally rusted apart because like I had just been driving it into the dirt and it had been like on Illinois salt roads for a long time, buried in snow. And I offloaded very large portion of my collection so that I could physically buy a car. Without Magic, I would have been in kind of a tough spot because I went from my car is fine and in perfect working order to doing a state inspection. And then they were like, yeah, you've rusted through the bottom. This is not drivable and it's not fixable. And I was like, oh, fuck.
I remember I might have been sophomore in college. I was like pretty young, but like starting to step into adulthood. And I have never gotten into partying, like drinking, drugs, anything like that. That's just not how I have fun. I don't, drink to this day. I've never been high. I've never been drunk. And I'm not really interested in that experience. I remember like being in class one morning and this group of like frat bros in the back were like, bro, I'm still so messed up from the weekend. Oh, I think I spent like $550 at the bar. Like, and I was like, $550 at a bar? What is this life? And then like one of them was like, yeah, I was in for like 300 myself. I just kept buying rounds for everyone. Was trying to get this girl to like me, this and that. And I'm like, what the hell? And then I like debriefed that experience with my Magic friends later. And they were like, yeah, we buy legacy decks instead. That's their entertainment budget. This is ours. Knowing now in my mid 30s that 20-year-old me was buying Tropical Islands instead of rounds for everyone at the bar. It's coming back big.
So one thing I would like to, I'm going to share a personal thing, but also just point out another very appropriate thing. So Brian talked about having a foiled out vintage deck. You might be listening to this in the year 2023 and going like, oh, so you just had $100,000 laying around. That's not quite how it was. Like a foiled out vintage deck in 2008 might have been $7,000. Like there's been a large inflation gap in which the difference in prices are now. So I would just like to point that out. But like Brian, I went through college owning the Epic Storm completely Japanese foil. It made me very happy. But a lot of people hear that I own Japanese foils and they're like, oh, Brian comes from money. My father drove milk trucks and my mom was a bus driver. They didn't exactly give me a whole lot. And what happened was, at a very young age, I talked about starting playing Magic when I was 10. By the time I was 12, I was pretty darn good. Like, I was like one of the better players in our game store. And whenever I won things, I would get myself something I wanted, and then it was mine. Like, I just wouldn't get rid of it. So it was something like, oh, I would get dual lands or whatever. And eventually, when I decided to make the jump to Japanese foils, I was just like, these are mine forever. I will sell other stuff that I might have that's extra to pay for the next event. Or when I was 16, I started working at Wendy's and I would get $80 to $100 a week. And I'd be like, okay, so Japanese foil brainstorms on eBay right now are $45. So I will buy a Japanese foil brainstorm and then the rest will pay for everything else for the week. And that is just what I did. Granted, Japanese foil brainstorms now are much more expensive, but I would skate by knowing that, like, I was like, okay, I can spend half of this on Magic or whatever. And I was just like, this is how I'm going to do what I want. It probably wasn't the best thing to do. Like, I probably could have used that full 100, but I invested in Magic and then it just paid out in the long run, luckily. But by the time I got to college, I was like, if I had to, I could sell a bunch of this stuff. But instead, by the time I graduated college, I only owned the Epic Storm because I sold literally everything else to get through. Like, I didn't work through college. I don't know if Brian did, but I was like, I want to enjoy my 4 years while I'm here. So by the time I was done, I might have owned 100 cards, but it was all cards that meant a lot to me at that time because I knew that this is what I wanted to do within the game.
So I worked for 1 full year and then took a break and then 1 summer. And if you look at my college transcripts, you can tell which of the times I was working and which times I wasn't. Like, it seriously affected my performance in school. But outside of actual like cooking at a restaurant, which is what I did, I also had some little Magic hustles on the side where I would buy a box of whatever the new set was from Star City. I think boxes were like $80 at the time. And you get 36 packs in your box, and then I would just fire a tournament locally, $3 entry, pack per person in the prize pool. And people liked it because it was just something to do on a Saturday or a Tuesday night or whatever. I would play in my tournaments, so there would be some amount of house rake where I win back some of my own packs, and just $3 per person, pack per entry. You end up with like $110 at the end of the box. I'm plus $30 on the box. I would buy another box and then like a set of FBB Japanese lightning bolts. And then my SCG order would be like the new box and these lightning bolts. And I would just like wash it and send it back around again. And, plus $30 every week or two. And as I would just fire these little tournaments, and that was a grind that I had during that time. And now those lightning bolts, I remember this specifically because that was like the year that I realized FBB was a thing that existed. I didn't even know it did exist. And I remember getting lightning bolts, birds of paradise, swords to plowshares, just all the staples in FBB. And all of those are genuinely expensive now. And at the time it was just, you could get a playset for under $30 because that was the margin I was working with.
I think one of my favorite things about like my exposure to Magic, like long time, like on a period of like 10 plus years, is that in addition to just like inserting yourself into an existing community, you also can have your chance to like carve your own place in the community and create like a home or resource for other people. Bryant made his website, which directly inspired Thraben University. Like I looked at his stuff and I went, I know enough that I could do this for my own community. And I'm tired of answering the same, like, Flicker Wisp is bad. Why are we playing Flicker Wisp question? Like, I just want to make things that I can just give to other people and be like, this is why. And like, not just in terms of building websites, but also in terms of building communities. Brian and I both have incredibly active Discord servers that I'd be happy to talk about more. I've been a part of massive undertakings like the Legacy Premier League that got people hyped up and excited. And like, I'm very happy that like I, as a content creator, can do things that make other people happy.
Yeah, and just being, like Bryant mentioned, these slightly older people took him under their wing and really taught him how to, be a better person in the world. And I had that too. And I have then flipped and been in the position to be that for a number of people since then. I'm older now. I have this YouTube channel, this podcast. Some people are like nervous to talk to me, which still is weird to me. Like, please don't be. I'm just a gamer. I just like some nerd with a microphone. I'm not Keanu Reeves. I get like I'll still post in just public Pittsburgh Facebook groups, just like, I'm going to SCG Richmond, anyone interested? And I will fill my car with 2 or 3 completely random people. Some of them are college kids who they're like, I would like to go, but I can't get to your house from my campus because I don't have a car. It's like, well, I'll pick you up, or I'll arrange someone who's coming through town to grab you. That's not a big deal. And just on the road with some 19-year-old kid I don't know, helping that out. And then also just like being the change, or being the voice of reason to help people change. Like when I was 17, 18, 19, I said a lot of words that I now regret saying. They were just kind of in the lexicon at the time. Also just a toxically surrounded white boy in America. Like many things that would be considered slurs, or at least in bad taste at this point. And I learned you should not say those words in mixed company, or really at all. In most cases. And now that I know that, I have spent the last 15 years or so, like, if I hear that at the LGS, I'm like, bro, not a cool word to say. And people are like, oh, yeah, my bad. And a lot of the times it's not like people's hearts are full of hate. My heart has never been full of hate, but I've said a lot of stupid words, and showing that the younger people that don't say that, and someone they look up to tells you not to say that, that goes a long way.
And it doesn't take much to inspire people. I'm going to leave their name off of this, but I was a guest on a small channel. We were doing a cube draft, and the people I was working with were like, yeah, what do you think he has in hand? And I just kind of paused for a second. I'm like, do you know your opponent? Do you know they're a dude? And they just like paused, thought about it for a second, and then we're like, oh shit, I just learned something. Like, thank you. Like, we're going to be better about that. There's a lot of opportunity to just like take these little nudges for people and get them to do these just like tiny things that are going to make someone else's experience in Magic better. And like as I grow as a content creator and more people have eyes on my stuff, I try to take those opportunities when I can. Just like pay it forward, be good to people, make the space more welcoming for people.
For sure.
Feels good.
Right. Yeah. And I can remember a specific moment. I was judging an event. I was probably 19 years old. I made a joke. I was actually just repeating a meme that I saw. Remember the old Courage Wolf meme? There was a spinoff called Insanity Wolf, which said inspiring things, but they were all crazy. I repeated one that should not have been repeated. And it was a joke that all my friends found very funny. Immediately, the two people I was speaking to, one turned his back and walked away from me, and the other looked at me and said, "That is not funny." And in that moment, I felt like extreme flare-up of anger, eclipsed by shame, eclipsed by they are completely right. And that was like a watershed, life-changing moment for me, realizing that like, oh, this subject is actually not funny. And it's not that these people need to grow a sense of humor. It's that me and my friends are idiots.
To change the topic slightly, we've all talked about going back to the game store and meeting people. I think, well, at least for me personally, I've lived in Syracuse for a very long time at this point, and I've been a part of the community. I've never quit Magic. Ever since I was 10, I've been going to the game store this entire time period. I'm now a 34-year-old guy, so 24 years. I've been going to local game stores. But one thing I've noticed is when I was younger, I had a tight-knit group of friends that I would see, and it would be great. And as I've gotten older, people have moved away, and the people have gotten younger and younger. I've done my part, like Brian mentioned, being like, hey, maybe you shouldn't say that's cancer. That's not a fun thing to say. In fact, like, it's pretty hurtful. You know, you never know whose mom just had cancer or whatever. And sometimes you'll make comments like that, but I've noticed that, like, I see younger groups forming, and the people that I am genuinely happy to see at game stores, those people are few and far between. Not that I don't like these people, but they're not the group that I played with when I was younger. And there's like, it's more acquaintances than anything now. And I felt like my love for the local game store has gotten smaller and smaller. COVID and the pandemic certainly didn't help that, but it's not the fault of the game store. It's more directly me and not having that friend group or those familiar faces that I once had. And it's something that I've battled with the last few years, and that's okay. Like, I'm not like trying to change anything. It's just like life has changed, the experience has changed, and I'm coping with it.
Yep, and that just comes with the age and responsibility. Like our mutual friend Matt Sperling recently announced that his second child's on the way, and even though he's qualified for the next few Pro Tours, he will not be participating in them. That's a person who is on the cusp of a Hall of Fame resume, like probably one Pro Tour top 8 away from, I guess the Hall of Fame is kind of defunct at this point, but he's right there knocking at the door of eternal greatness in Magic the Gathering. And he's just like, nope, I have a family now. See you later, everybody. That's fine. I've noticed many of the people I've met through this game have that sort of pause button on friendship that I really appreciate and is kind of required here, where it's like I mentioned in the pre-show, and I said his name when I moved to Pittsburgh, Chris Stagno, one of my best friends in the world. He moved to Las Vegas last year. He lives in Vegas. Like, I obviously don't see him. I'm in Pittsburgh. And we're on a group text and stuff where we like send each other Marvel Snap screenshots, and he's mostly out of Magic at this point. But we don't hang out 2 or 3 times a week like we used to. When I know that when I see him, it will immediately be like nobody ever left. And we're all just right where we left off. And I have dozens, scores of friends, maybe hundreds of friends around the world who it's like that for. I know that I lived in England for a while in college. I studied abroad, and I know my core group of gamer friends from England, most of whom I have not seen since I left England in 2010. If I hop off the plane, it'll immediately be just like breaking each other's balls and picking up where we left off, like we've been there the whole time. And I appreciate that about this community, because I have had some other friends where it's like I graduated from college, moved out of town, I didn't respond to a couple text messages right away, and then it's like I'm feeling left out here, and I don't know if we could keep being friends. I'm just like, oh damn, really? Okay, bye, I guess. I genuinely can't be that same level of friend I was when we lived 5 minutes away from each other, now that I'm across the state. So if this isn't going to work for you, I guess it was nice knowing you. Doesn't doesn't work for me. But I love that pause unpause thing that a lot of gamer friends can do.
I think it's also worth mentioning that like there are also some darker times associated with like obsession with Magic. Like I have probably ruined some like romantic relationships by like obsessing over Magic too much, by traveling out of town too much, by like having to do my 2 local tournaments over the weekend rather than spending time with my girlfriend. And like current Phil is working very hard on like maintaining good like personal life versus gaming balance. Past Phil didn't always do that as well. I don't regret my time with Magic as a whole because it has been wonderful and has opened so many doors, but I definitely regret being on the wrong side of life balance with the game at times. And if you find yourself in that position, James, the guy who runs the Humans of Magic podcast, has a pretty good book about it. I think it's called like Magic the Addiction or something like that, that may be worth looking into if you find yourself struggling with that balance.
Yeah, I will jump on that point as well. I wasn't really planning on talking about this, but now that it's in my head, I have much to say. There's actually an article. I hope you could still find it in the current upheaval of the Magic archives, but it was written by Aaron Forsyth's wife for Star City Games, where she talked in retrospect, like 5 years removed, about being the girlfriend of someone on the Magic Pro Tour, about their time when they were in college in Pittsburgh together, and what it was like for her, and what it was like for her talking to the other girlfriends of the other gamers and all of that. And then now, like, looking back as a stable married couple, looking back at her time during that time and what that did to her. That does exist. If you want to go find it, it's very good. And I've experienced some of that in a variety of ways. I actually quit judging because I realized I was in my first serious relationship in a very long time, and I was on my way to judge some Grand Prix or something and realized I don't want to do this. I'm not having fun, and I would rather spend this weekend with my girlfriend, and what am I even doing? And then I just never judged another regional event after that. It was just done. I've also done the opposite, where I was seeing a girl in college, and I just mentioned, like, oh, the Magic Pro Tour is this weekend. I'm looking forward to coverage. And she was like, what's the Magic Pro Tour? And I told her what it was. And she just was like beside herself laughing. She's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I broke up with her on the spot. I was just like, okay, well, if that's what you think, fuck you. And I was gone. And I've gone that way too. And I stand by that decision to this day. Like, I don't know that it would have gone very far with someone who believes the Magic Pro Tour is, air quotes, the stupidest thing they've ever heard. So goodbye to you. And I've also experienced a lot of jealousy from partners about Magic the Gathering. And I kind of just sort of float out there early. I've been with Magic for 27 years. I just met you. This is not a fight you want to get into. Like, I will find the balance for us, but don't ask me to quit this game. Don't ask me to sell my cards. Don't go down that road, and we'll be okay. And my current partner is an equestrian. She rides horses. So she knows all about stupid hobbies that cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. And it's a great match for that reason. And I stay out of her horse business, and she stays out of my Magic business, and we are very happy outside of our little islands, and it's great.
In college, one thing, well, actually, let's rewind. In high school, I dealt with a lot of nerd shame. I felt guilty that I played Magic because, like, the cooler people didn't, but it's who I was. And I had tried to share, I'm really into Magic or whatever with a few ladies of my life, and was just sort of ridiculed. And by the time I got to college, I kept it to myself. Like, my roommates knew that I played, but, like, I didn't really talk about it much, even though I was heavily invested. And at some point, I met this young woman, and I decided that I wasn't going to tell her about it. I liked her too much, and she just didn't need to know. So 6 months into dating, things are going very well. And one night, she gets drunk and starts Googling all of her friends, and she Googles me, and she's like, holy shit. It was just pages upon pages of SCG results, MTG the source, deck list photos, everything you could think of. She calls me and she's like, you didn't tell me about this? And I was like, nah, I didn't really think it was worth mentioning. And she's just like, really? So she was so dumbfounded that she told her parents. And they're just like, you have to dump this guy. He's clearly a loser. They're like, you have no future with a guy who spends all of his time playing with cardboard. He's not going to be able to provide for you or your family. And after a while, she just believed them. She's like, yeah, we don't have a future here. I'm going to end this. And I was just like, what? And she's just like, yeah, it's not over you lying to me. And I could see it being a lie, more of an admission, but it's definitely a little bit of a lie. But she's just like, yeah, I can't see myself having a future with you when you have this hobby. So I think long-term, Bryant, looking back, super glad that relationship ended. But also, like, just don't be ashamed of who you are. Like, when I met my wife, it was like literally one of the first things I told her on our date. I'm like, I'm a gigantic nerd. I play Magic the Gathering. And it just felt so much better to be open and honest. So that is my recommendation if you're out there battling with that yourself.
Patrick Chapin was a huge influence on me when I was in that 18 to 22 college range. That was when he was extremely prolific as a Magic personality, writer, video person, etc. Chapin, he has kind of a seedy past that you're welcome to Google if you want. Don't idolize everything he's ever done, but he's certainly a confident, successful human being in the world who has no shame whatsoever about the fact that he's a huge nerd and Magic the Gathering player. And he conveyed a lot of that in his content. And I just got into, like, rather than like, yeah, I have this kind of nerdy hobby. It's like cards and stuff. Like, I flipped that to, yeah, I play Magic the Gathering. It's a big part of my life and my social circles, and I travel a lot for it and stuff, just right off the bat. It has skipped that whole hide it under the rock, because the person who thinks you are incompatible because you have this hobby is not a person you want to be with anyway.
So last night I had some friends over, and they had some friends in town. I didn't know these people, but I was like, yeah, if they're friends of yours, they're friends of mine. I invited them in. One of them looks at my living room table, sees 2 sets of Phyrexian coasters, and is like, oh, I started playing Magic a couple months ago. Like, this is kind of cool. And I was like, oh, if you think that's cool. And then I brought them into my office, gave them a set of my custom tokens, showed them the streaming setup. And they were just like, this is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. And if you are proud of who you are and the things you're doing, and you don't try to hide it, you will find more people who are interested in, if not the exact same thing you are, the same sorts of things you are. And you will vibe with them really well. And we hit it off, and we had a great night just chilling and chatting about assorted nerdy things, because I was just comfortable with using that as an icebreaker.
Yeah, and I feel like I told this story very recently. I hope it wasn't on the pod. Sorry to repeat myself if it was. But when I resigned my professional job last year to be a full-time Magic the Gathering YouTuber, I worked with a dozen different families at the time, plus my main office of my company. So I basically had to resign 13 times. I had to tell each of these groups that I was leaving, and then answer the question, oh, where are you going? What are you doing? 13 times. And every time I was really concerned about saying that I was leaving this professional position. I mean, highly regarded, making good money. I was very good at my job, and to go make a gaming YouTube channel. 100% of people I told that to were like, that is awesome. I love YouTube. I love gaming, or some variation thereof. One person, a mom, a late 40s mom, was like, oh, you're going to be a content creator. She even knew that vernacular. And these were all kinds of people, some better off people, some not so well off people. One of my families were Indian immigrants. I worked with a bunch of folks of different colors and economic status, and to a person, they were all like, oh, that's awesome. YouTube rules. Gaming is fun. And not a single one gave me a sideways look or a sneer or oh, really? It just didn't happen. That gave me a lot of confidence in the decision I was making.
Reminds me a lot of, since we've talked about college a number of times in this episode, you would find out what people's major was, and you'd be like, oh, good luck with nutrition management, or whatever you may so choose. And I think a lot times have changed, especially in the year 2023, where being a content creator, it's something you see in your Twitter feed every single day. Like, as long as you use these apps, it's a part of your daily life. And I think it's just a lot more manageable now than if you had told people 20 years ago that you want to be a social personality.
Yeah, the thing about that though, like you scroll through your Twitter feed, you see all of these content creators, but what maybe isn't visible is for every content creator who has 5,000 followers or whatever, there's a lot of people who are streaming to an audience of their like 2 friends and who are, you know, struggling with growth, deciding whether or not this is a thing for them, you know, having anxiety about like whether or not it is worth their time. You know, there are a lot of people in very different places in content creation, and some of those get real dark. And I don't know that I want to like delve into that towards the tail end of this episode here, but like there were a lot of times in my content creation career where I like thought about giving it up to like reclaim my free time, or wondered whether or not it was worth it. Then I went to like my next GP or whatever, and some random dude, I don't remember his name. I remember exactly what the entire scenery around me looked like. I remember what they were wearing. They like came up to me and they're like, "Hey, are you Phil Gallagher?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Like, will you sign my Thalias? Like, I've learned so much from your content. Like, I top 8'd a bunch of my locals, like, following your deck list. And, like, every time I had one of those moments where someone told me, like, you are a critical portion of my life. I fall asleep to your videos. You're my lunch break every day. Like, I learned a lot about being a better person from watching you. Like, I've changed my language to this, like, because of my content. Those fill me with the biggest possible, like, warm and fuzzies, and, like, just rekindle all of my energy.
Yeah, and we're not advocating that everyone should be a content creator. In fact, quite the opposite. Like, if you want to do that, do it. If you're not willing to stream to 2 people, don't do it, because that's where you're going to be for a long time. But yeah, like Phil said, there's a lot of folks who go unnoticed in the space, even though they're working hard. I get follows on Twitter all the time. I do click on most people who follow me just to see who they are and what they're about, and I'll get followed by, like, I'm making this name up, don't look for them, like the Magic Gamesmanship Podcast or something, and they have this really official looking commissioned art as their user image on Twitter, and I click on it and it's like 2 followers, and their pod gets like 7 listens, and they crank it out every week, and they're on episode 35. And I'm like, damn, that's a lot of work or not a lot of recognition. Count all of my lucky stars that mine has gone on the trajectory it has, because there was a time that I was going to quit. There were times that I had to completely change up all of that. When I started streaming on Twitch, which was many years ago, on Twitch, not even on YouTube yet, I immediately felt the tension of like holding the Twitch streaming schedule like 3 nights a week. And I would come home from work, say basically goodbye to my girlfriend who lived with me, and just go into my office for 5 or 6 hours. And that circles back to like the balancing whatever your relationship with Magic is with your relationship with the human beings in your life. That was really tough on me to have to do it like that. And somehow here we are, 4.5, 5 years later, whatever it's been, and balancing it successfully as a job. So survivorship bias is here, but I'm going to avoid that until everybody be careful with that.
So one thing I'd like to point out is that all 3 of us had periods of time in which we did this for next to no one. So Brian, for example, on the homepage of your YouTube channel right now, there's a video with 376 views. This was 3 years ago. You're now pushing a bad video for you is 10,000 views in the first 24 hours. That's a long way to go. I have videos on my channel of me playing Modern Gift Storm in 2018 that are still like 57 views. Those videos exist. You're like, at some point, everyone who does this creates content for a small number of people, and then you grow. Phil, I'm sure you've written articles or videos or whatever of people that 30, 50 people, like we've all been there. And I think you have to do it for yourself mostly, and then eventually you will get some recognition. Will you be the next Brian Coval? Odds are no, but you might find something that makes you happy. You could, I don't know, you could do better than me. I'm not that great, but there's a lot of places where you can find your niche. That's what I'm trying to say here is, but you have to put in the effort, and ultimately you can't do it for the view count or the number, because ultimately that's out of your control. You just have to manage what you do control, and that's the content you create and, you know, the joy it brings you.
I remember streaming to sub 10 people. I remember back when, like, financially, the $700 it was going to take me to buy Death and Taxes on Magic Online was like a cripplingly large financial purchase. And I finally pulled the trigger, and I streamed to, you know, 5 or 10 people for a long time, mostly like the super invested D&T bros of that age. And like, it was fun, but I definitely ran content at a deficit for a long time, between like the cost of buying my deck on Magic Online, the cost of hosting my own website when I wasn't running ads on it or anything like that. I was definitely in the red producing content for quite some time.
Yeah, same. And before we move on, we're moving into the last 10 minutes of the pod here. We said we were going to talk about Orcish Bowmasters, but we're rolling with this. We can talk about that another time. We're going to finish out the pod just talking about life as a Magic the Gathering player. The thing Phil just said about streaming to 5 people, 10 people, I saw somebody, I forget who it was, post something to give you some perspective, where like you look at Mr. Beast, who gets 120 million views in a day, you know, whatever. That's Mr. Beast. 5 people watching your stream. If 5 people just walked up to you and watched what you were doing in real life, that would be a lot of people. If you're like a street performer, if you're ever walking down the street and you see someone like banging on buckets or playing the saxophone or whatever, if 10 people are standing around them, that's a great crowd for what they're doing. 20 people, that's a lot. You get to like 100 people, you've filled a high school auditorium. 500 people, that's like a high school football game. Like I've looked at it, and I sell out Madison Square Garden twice a week with my view count. And like, that's crazy to me. And still, like, 10,000 views on a video is nothing compared to Mr. Beast or Mark Rober. And it's not about being Mr. Beast or Mark Rober. It's just about what am I happy with, and are people watching? And really, I know a bunch of people who just literally stream for their friends. They have no version of aspirations of being a streamer ever. It's just sort of like, I'm going to boot up the Minecraft game that I've been playing for 12 years and move around and build some stuff. And then their 5 or 6 friends who may or may not live around them anymore, circling back to friends scattering over the world, moving out as adults. We have the internet, and it's just like, I'm playing Minecraft, and my 5 friends I played Minecraft with in high school can watch me do it wherever they are. And we interact in the chat, and that is enough for them. And I think that's really cool.
I think sometimes, especially when you're smaller, you don't realize the impact that you have on other people's lives. I'm going to tell a personal anecdote. I'm going to leave the person's name out of it. I think it was 2 years ago now. I had a student at the end of the year like walk up to me last day of school and gift me this like very nice framed Elden Ring thing that is hanging in my stream background now. And at the end of the year, they were just like, yeah, Mr. Gallagher, like, you're so cool. Like, you were an inspiration to me. Like, thank you so much for just like being that teacher who was like comfortable with being nerdy and encouraging me throughout the year. And this kid had like never said anything to me all year about like how much I meant to him. And I didn't know that until like I was never going to see him again. And finally, he just took that moment to say like, thanks, what you're doing means so much. And like sharing my passion with people inspires other people, gets them fired up. And that's worth it all. That's worth all that time.
It is an interesting time we're living in. And I don't want to, be one of a panel of 3 white guys to talk about representation here, but nerds are in history a group that has not been treated well. And we're in a time where Marvel is the biggest thing on the planet, and Star Wars. You could buy Star Wars merch at Target, and Lego is very expensive and very trendy. And just all the stuff that when we were kids was like, ew, you like that? Is now the way to go. Like I work with kids, or I did before I became a YouTuber, but I worked with kids, and you got these like 9-year-olds showing up to school like decked out in Spider-Man gear. If I did that, I would have been bullied into the ground. And like I remember my first day of kindergarten, I had Power Ranger shoes on, and somebody with an older brother who had told them Power Rangers isn't cool was just like, ew, you used to like Power Rangers? You're a baby. And that was one of my first social interactions after leaving my house as a young child. Right now, if I were wearing Power Ranger shoes, that would be pretty dope. I could own that. And, you know, like Phil just said, being the 30-something adult authority figure in a role like teaching or a manager at a wherever you work or whatever it is, or just an elder statesman at the LGS, showing up in your Power Ranger shoes and your Adventure Time t-shirt or whatever it is you want to represent, and just being unapologetically, this is what I'm into, and that's okay. That does mean something to people who are still in that Magic the Gathering is for nerds phase of their existence.
Brian, I hope that somebody, one of your fans, buys you light up Power Ranger adult shoes. Like, they have to have lights, but I want them to light up, and I want you to rock them at an event. Aside from that,
I'm a size 10 or 11, depending on the brand. And if anyone wants to facilitate this, BoshNRollStream@gmail.com. Reach out.
Aside from that, I have 2 points I would like to share. So one about Phil's story about a student coming up to him. I have the opposite experience in my life, where it was like 8th grade science, the entire year, my professor called me Bryant. And the guy was so intimidating, I just never cracked at him. And on the last day, I was like, my name's Bryant. He goes, enough joking, Bryant, go sit down. And I was just like so soul crushed. But I was just like, that taught me a lesson that I need to speak up sooner. I didn't learn that lesson until 8th grade. And then the other thing is, Phil mentioned running articles for a loss with no ads. One thing I would like to drive home here is you should be happy for people that have made it, not spiteful. And I think that's something that comes up a lot within content creation in the Magic the Gathering community. Like, for example, Brian gets a new sponsor. A lot of his fans are like, yes, Brian's getting support. But there's some people out there that are like, great, more ads, this is lame. That's not the way you should think. Like, being overly negative doesn't really get you anywhere. And think about it if you were in their shoes. Like, running Google ads on your site is awesome. That means that you're getting views. Like, that person doesn't have to ask for help to pay for hosting or anything like that. Or ads in their YouTube videos means that they're going to be able to like buy dinner or whatever this week. Like, you should be thinking like, oh, that's sweet for them, good for them. Not just like, oh, here's 15 seconds of my life wasted, or great banner ad on the side. Glass half full will get you a long way.
Yeah, we hate to end the pod on a rage out, but definitely somebody was having a rough week this week and appeared in both my comments and in Phil's. Basically, the interaction was they asked me if I brewed the deck that I won Grand Prix Columbus with. And I was like, oh, I did a bunch of early work on the shell, and then some people took it this direction, and then Team Lotus Box discovered you could put Karn in the Urza deck, and it really broke it. And the reply was, so no, you didn't brew the deck. I was like, okay, cool. And then I was just like, this person's having a tough time, and I sent the screenshot to Phil, where apparently the person had also been going off in Phil's comments. And I hope that person's dog gets better, or whatever's actually wrong with them. But being mad at someone for succeeding in a place where you wish you could succeed is not productive to anyone, and it's really only hurting you. I don't know what to tell you. Don't be that guy. And luckily, because of all of my friendships and interactions and everything over the last 27 years, I am able to know that that's just one weirdo. And Magic is actually great, and this community does generally like what I'm up to. So shout out to everybody who I've met over the last 27 years. Even that guy. We're all part of the ecosystem. Magic is about the gathering, and sometimes it's not about Orcish Bowmasters.